Look me in the eyes again. I need to feel your hands upon my face. Words can be like knives, they can cut you open. And in the silence around you and holds you, I think I might have inhaled you. I can feel you behind my eyes.
As creators, we spend thousands on cameras, lenses, lighting, but the tool I most touch, anything more than anything else on a single day, is my mouse. Now, I've been using the MX Creator setup since it launched. Now, the panel, the dial, and I've used the MX Master 3S for a few years now. I recently upgraded to the MX Master 4 for Mac, and it's not because I had to, but because the MX ecosystem has genuinely improved my workflow. Now, this isn't a spec breakdown, this is more of a real-world use case and how I've used this to basically streamline my workflow from creation to editing to output. So if you edit consistently, then you know editing is a rhythm, and it's not just shortcuts, it's muscle memory, it's fluidity. It's not having to think about the tool that you have in hand. It's more along the lines of thinking about what story are you trying to tell and removing any roadblocks to being able to do that. Now, the MX Creator set has been that for me over the last year or so while I was learning to use this and adding it to my everyday workflow. And switching from the MX Master 3S over to the MX4 Master for Mac, tongue twister, it wasn't a big difference at first, not a dramatic change. However, there is a subtle change in the ergonomics of the mouse, and that's something you should be aware of before you make that decision. For me and the size hands that I have, it's been okay over time. Like over 3 to 4 days, it now feels just as natural as the MX3, but I did notice the first time I picked it up that there is a subtle change. And changing to or adding the addition of the haptic feedback was something that at first was like, ooh, that feels interesting, right? But now it's intentional. It feels intentional. So like when I'm using the pop-up menu, etc., and the haptic feedback, feel it as you're going over the different options, and then when you select an option, that feels natural now. And I almost look for it now in the mouse. That's when I know, like, I'm expecting something to happen. It's almost like Pavlov, right? It's like this thing happens and then you expect this output. And so that's kind of where the MX Master 4 for Mac is for me now with that haptic feedback. So it feels good at this point. Even though the ergonomics has changed, the side scroll wheel isn't too much of a difference. It still feels like it's in a great place, and feels like an extra button on the front there, 3 buttons now instead of 2 for using the mouse, which is also another adjustment, but I'm getting used to that as well, just being quite honest. Now the scroll wheel, the side scroll wheel is still excellent, but the reason I stick with the MX Master series is because of the main infinite scroll wheel, right? That's what separates it from every other mouse on the market. I think there is one now out with a similar scroll wheel capability, but the ability to just infinite scroll through, sheets and Excel and different things like that, web pages, etc. I use that on a day-to-day basis, no matter what I'm doing, whether it's just browsing, whether it's editing, whether it's creating, whether it's just shopping, right? I'm using that infinite scroll wheel, and that's really the reason I stick with the MX Master Series mouse. I mean, that's the reason I had the G604 originally as part of my edit workflow with all of the MMO buttons for customization on there. That was the mouse that kind of brought me into this kind of stratosphere of using a Logitech mouse on a day-to-day basis. But that infinite scroll wheel is still the reason that I stick to this series. And one of the reasons I think that this is perfect, because no matter what you're doing, it unlocks, that freedom of creativity and movement that just the other mouses don't have. And so that's why I stick with this, MX series. So you let me know your thoughts on that. if you use the MX series, MX Master 3S, or even if you switch to the 4, is that a big portion, the big reason why you stick with it or not? For me, it is. So you let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Now, the creative workflow and like editing and things like that, this is where this system actually shines. And I've kind of basically got this to where I want it from an editing standpoint in DaVinci Resolve, where I'm really fluid and easy. I can edit pretty much a whole video without actually touching my, type out the names of my folders, etc. But once I'm in it, I'm really good there. As far as like Lightroom is really good. I've mapped out like exposure and some contrast and different stuff like that as far as like editing the photos, etc. Photoshop, it's still a work in process, right? I'm still figuring out what's the best layout for using it with Photoshop. Typically do Photoshop really thumbnails only. I really don't do Photoshop for much more than that. But that's the biggest thing about this, is that you can adjust it over time and you can kind of make it fit to the use case that you need. But that's also, being honest and transparent, that's also kind of where some of it's not shortfalls or anything like that. That's kind of where some of the difficulty can be with using something like this, is that first learning curve, the first understanding of how to use it. The nice thing about Logi Options is that there are some default profiles that you can usually pick for DaVinci and Premiere and Lightroom and Photoshop and all those different things. So you can get used to what they set, but then you can also over time customize and change things around to fit the way that you want them. But you do have to invest time into making sure that you get what you want set up. And that can be the thing that kind of makes it clunky at first, until you start to really understand your workflow and left hand, right hand, scroll and dial, mouse button, etc. Then you can have it for when it's just default settings as well, for when you're just at your web browsing, etc., navigating your Mac or your laptop or whatever you're using, your desktop, whatever, you can have settings for that as well. So either way, there's different options that you have, and you can customize those options, right? So that's the beauty of the system, is that you can make it however you want. The kind of learning curve is that you have to go through that process that can be clunky at first to reach that kind of perfect state. So I think all in all, this really is for someone that's really serious about editing and kind of creating this workflow that's needed all the time. Like if you're casually editing here and there, I don't think you need to invest in anything like this. Even just the mouse would be fine, right? Or a mouse similar that you can program shortcuts to the buttons and stuff like that if you have multiple buttons outside of just a left and right trigger. But if you're really needing something for some real consistent editing, I definitely think this is a great option. There are other options on the market as well, like the Toolbox and stuff like that, but I've been using this now for over a year. I paid my own money, like I said at the beginning of the video, so this isn't a sales video or anything like that. But if you were wondering about this and whether it's worth the money, for me, I think it's worth the money, where I have multiple channels and a social media presence on Instagram for several different reasons, personal and for basketball and stuff like that. It's very useful for me, but overall, I think the experience, definitely helps speed up your workflow and your output. So if that's really what this is about, is output and being able to get it out quickly, I think it's definitely worth that. So I don't know, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you enjoyed today's content, consider subscribing to the channel, and as always, stay cozy in that crazy world, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.